There is no place like this place anywhere near this place, so this must be the place. Good evening, all, and welcome to tonight's event, or final in our Nurses Week series. Diversity and Inclusion or Tokens, our robust Q&A session with Dr. Kechi and Dr. Moore. I am Dr. Janiece Linton. I am here sharing this platform with my DNPs of color colleagues, Drs. Danielle, Dr. Conyers, Dr. Bryant, and or huge shout out to our visionary founder and president, Dr. Danielle McCamey. Our mission at DNPs of Color is to serve DNPs of color through networking, mentorship, and advocacy to increase diversity in doctoral studies, clinical practice, and leadership. I'll pass the mic to Dr. Angel Daniels.
Good evening, everyone. So just a little Zoom etiquette, a little guidelines for our Q&A tonight. We would appreciate if you raise your hand to share comments. Try to keep your responses under 45 minutes. Please mute, but using the camera is optional for you. Use the chat to comment. And at the end of the session, please network by posting your social media handle and your LinkedIn links. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I am Dr. Yvette Conyers. I'm going to take this time to do some brief introductions of our two guests with us today. So our first guest that we have, I will not be reading their bios completely, I'm just taking some snippets of those. So our first guest that we have with us is Dr. Kechi Iheduru-Anderson. She is the inaugural nursing program director and associate professor at the Herbert H. and Grace A. Dow College of Health Professions in Central Michigan University in Mount Pleasant, Michigan. Dr. Kechi is the inaugural nursing program director. As I mentioned, she is also the inaugural fellow of the American Association of College of Nursing, Elevated Leaders in Academic Nursing, ELAN. Dr. Kechi earned her doctoral degree in nursing education and master's degree in nursing leadership and healthcare administration from Regis College, Weston, Massachusetts. She is a certified nurse educator, and her research interests focus on equity, diversity, and inclusion, and anti-racism, which we're going to hear all about tonight, as well as her leadership in education. Dr. Kechi is an active member of the Association of Black Nurse Faculty, National Black Nurse Association, American Nurses Association, and many other organizations and several committees. Tonight, I am happy to share with you that Dr. Kechi received the 2022 Nightingale Award from Oakland University School of Nursing and its Board of Visitors. Let's give her a round of applause for her Excellence in Research Award. Thank you, Dr. Kechi, for joining us tonight. And next we have our other presenter, and so happy to have Dr. Shawana Moore here with us, who is a nationally recognized board-certified women's health nurse practitioner, specializing in providing women's and gender-related care throughout the lifespan. She previously served as the assistant professor and director of women's health, gender-related nurse practitioner program at Jefferson College. Currently, this is a new position, she is an associate professor, clinical track, and DMP director at Nell Hodgson, Woodruff School of Nursing at Emory University. She is also the current chair of the National Association of Nurse Practitioners in Women's Health. Dr. Moore's research interests include women's health, gender-affirming care, environmental, climate, and women's health, adolescent health, gynecology disorders, telehealth and women's health care settings, and DEI. Dr. Moore holds a Bachelor of Science in Concentration in Biology from Wilberforce University. She earned her Master's of Science with a specialty in women's health and her DMP from Thomas Jefferson. She is also an alumnus of the National League of Nursing, Lead Institute, and Jefferson Leadership Academy. Let's welcome tonight, Dr. Moore. Thank you for joining us. So I am actually kicking things off here. and your article that we had talking about diversity and inclusion or tokens, a qualitative study of Black women academic nurse leaders in the United States. This was a powerful article. And sort of the first question that we're going to start off with, and please feel free to ask questions in the chat. We'll be monitoring that. What was the catalyst for this research? What was the impetus? What was the behind the thing that really pushed this to birth?
Thank you for that question. It is, you know, when you do something and people want to know if, well, have you, studied this with this group of people? Or, sometimes, the feedback I got in some of my earlier studies was like, oh, well, what region of the country did you get your participants from, right? Because oftentimes it is hard to think that some of the things that in the quotes in some of my studies, people don't want to believe that it's happening where they work, right? They want to think, oh yeah, this can be true. No, it doesn't happen where I work, right? So I get those questions. So my last publication last year, the white-black hierarchy, raised a lot of questions. And some of the questions I got even that from emails, or even some of them were nice emails, some of them were challenges, and some of them were like questions. Well, have you talked to nurse faculty? Were nurse faculty part of your, group or participants? So I thought to myself, well, I met Dr. Moore, by the way, at a conference, and I said, hey, you want to work together? we need to talk about this. You want to work together on something? So I said to him, like, listen, this is what I'm trying to do. Are you down with this, right? Let's go in and look at, nurse leaders in academia. Let's not just look at faculty. Let's look at leaders in academia, because the next question we're going to get is, wow, did you look at nurse leaders? So why don't we just keep the faculty level and just go straight to the top and see, what the experience is like. And that's what the catalyst was for, because I also wanted to sort of an awakening. I think nursing needed an awakening about the condition of our profession and how some people within our profession really belong or don't belong in the profession, or how they treated. So that's why I decided, let's go to academia and let's go to the top of academia, because that is where the socialization of nurses begin. So that's really what the catalyst is for this study, is let's go there, because if we can, and for many of you who are in academia, I'm sure part of the reason is because you wanted to make a difference at the beginning, right? You want to get the students when they are students, so they can be better nurses, better human beings, and treat people better, when they become nurses. So let's go to the source of where we begin to socialize our people and see what is happening there, and how what is happening there could be influencing how we behave and how we act. So that's really where this started. So, and I'm glad, Shawana was like, I call her Shawana. So Dr. Moore, pardon me. So, I'm so used to calling you Shawana, I'm just gonna keep doing that.
That's okay.
So she's like, yeah, of course, this is great. Let's do it, right? So that's how they started, is let's go to the beginning. Let's go to where we socialize our nurses, because they learn, whether you like it or not, they're seeing, they're learning, and they're gonna behave the way we act, so.
And if I can just build on what Dr. Kechi has said, I think the richness that I said would come from this experience is the ability to collaborate with a colleague of color who look like me, who can identify with challenges that I may have experienced in academia. So when Dr. Kechi came to me with the opportunity, I was thrilled, because I don't always meet people at a conference who actually want to collaborate and actually continue through the collaboration process. And I met Dr. Kechi right before COVID. We were at AACN in Florida, and right before COVID hit. And we stayed in contact over that time and were able to collaborate. And I think the biggest thing that really drew me to support Kechi in this manuscript and study was the ability to shed light on problems that were current within our nursing profession that was typically silenced. So it was a way to really amplify those challenges or problems and shed light that will hopefully bring forth changes.
Thank you, Dr. Moore. You know, that really stuck with me, Dr. Kechi, in terms of the awakening, right? And I'm sure the nursing community has become woke, right? You say the term woke. And hopefully others will continue to be, as you said, as this is a role model, the catalyst for this, right, is so that also other students can see what's going on out here, other faculty members, other in nursing leadership. So thank you, Dr. Moore and Dr. Kechi, for sharing that. I guess my next question I have is, many organizations were cited in the work, right? You know, you got all cited AACN, you cited ANA, you cited National League of Nursing as either previously have contributing somewhat, right? Or just now starting to have this discussion about DE&I. Have any of these organizations come forward and said anything? Have they responded at all to your work?
I would say yes and no. So AACN especially, you know, so I have nurse leaders from AACN who might meet me. So I have somebody who works for AACN board, who is also from Michigan, one of the universities, and not particularly this work, this particular publication, but she talked about, you know, using part of my work, previous work, when they were setting up the new essentials, you know, for nursing education, right? For, you know, the one that came out last year. She said, "Oh, Kechi, I'm so glad to see you. We use your work. You know, it was really front and center when we were trying to talk about, you know, how to make changes to the new essentials for nursing education." So that was really refreshing, right? Because oftentimes we make those changes and the voices of Black people and other people of color are forgotten, right? Because nobody has raised the issues, or when we talk about it, we talk about patients treating nurses badly. We don't talk about nurses treating nurses badly. We don't talk about nurses experiencing racism from other nurses. We don't talk about faculty experiencing racism from faculty and vice versa. So just, you know, her saying that was good. And I think one of the other things, it was when the National Academy of Science cited some of my work. That was validating. You know, when I saw that, you know, I was really validated. I thought to myself, if I never publish anything else, this is saying, this is important, this was important work. And I'll tell you that I got a lot of pushback on studying racism in nursing, a lot. And from nurses across the board, right? So what? You know, people say, "You're so brave studying that." I said, "I'm not brave, I'm terrified, but I don't care anyway," right? So I'm gonna do it. What are they gonna do? Not publish it. I just keep pushing until somebody does. So for me, using that work and citing it was refreshing. And like I said, I also have people who have challenged me. I had somebody invite me to come to a radio show because they were angry that I used the word white superiority and white supremacy in my article. And I said, maybe if you read it and discussed and understand the definition, you would not want to put me. I said, you know, so some of those things, those challenges, I wasn't gonna give the person the opportunity, you know, to try to trash my work because they don't understand it, or one single word there annoyed them in the process, you know, of what I was doing. So I think that many people have received it well. Many people are still uncomfortable with it. Sometimes I do a presentation and somebody would say, "Well, we can see the passion you have for your work." Well, that's not what I want you to see. I don't want you to see the passion about my work. I want you to understand the reason behind the work and understand that the words in this work is not mine. It is from people experiencing it. So that I'm trying to say to you with the passion that I feel about it, you are missing the whole point of that, right? So there are still people who feel that way about it. Now my thing has gone back. I have to stand up and wave my hand. Is emotional, and I'll do that later. But so yes, I think it's been acknowledged, and I have collaborated with other people. You see Dr. Wade there. So I have a lot of champions. I have Dr. Lucinda there. So all of these people make me feel good because they validate me, they validate my work, they give me courage to keep going, so whether the nursing organizations do something or not, that I'm even here talking to you today is more validating and more important than whatever anybody else is gonna say about it.
And then the other thing I want to just chime in and say is somebody actually reached out to Dr. Kechi for us to submit an abstract to Transcultural Nursing Society. So they were really, someone from, I think their maybe board reached out to Dr. Kechi and really encouraged our group to submit an abstract to see if we can hopefully have a peer review and be invited to present that to the transcultural nursing community. So that was one nursing organization that did reach out to Dr. Kechi directly about the manuscript and was really interested in having it discussed on a national level.
Thank you.
Hello, Dr. Kechi, Dr. Moore. My question for you gets a little bit into your framework or your theory. So one thing we would like for you to share with us is why the critical race theory over other frameworks, and were there other frameworks considered? Can you share that with us?
Yes, when I first started, I'm like, oh, maybe I'll use intersectionality. And then I'm like, well, maybe it won't capture exactly what I'm looking for, right? Or what we're looking for. So then I'm like, intersectionality is based on critical race theory. So if I use critical race theory.
I'll put my address in the chat. Perfect.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Okay. And then Nancy,
Mute
Kathy,
for us, Dr. McIntosh. Thank you.
I think you're muted.
Dr. Kechi, we need you to unmute.
I'm sorry. Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
I apologize. Yeah. So I thought to myself, well, critical race theory is all encompassing, right? It talks about power dynamics. And if I'm looking at nurse leaders, I need to capture both the intersectionality of race and power, right? Because critical race theory is going to capture the power dynamics that can happen when there is race relations occurring. And, with nursing as well, the previous study have already shown that nursing is deeply seated in Eurocentric ideology. Everything we do is based on that. The nurse faculty survey also indicates that nursing is predominantly white, period. So there is definitely a power dynamic that is happening within nursing profession at every level. So in order to capture that experience clearly, we needed a theory that is gonna be all encompassing, and critical race theory speaks to that. Plus, I wanted a counter narrative. We needed a counter narrative. We wanted the nurses who responded. We wanted their voice elevated. We wanted their stories told in a way that it is counteracting and spoken from their own lived experiences. And critical race theory captures that. Because when I'm looking at it, when we're looking at interpreting our findings, we have to interpret it based on that, right? When they are saying something to us, we know what they're saying. We don't have to try to interpret it in a way that makes us more comfortable or other people more comfortable, because that's more validating for the voices that a nurse leader talks to you about their experiences. You have to be happy that they wanted to talk to you about that. And if I'm going to misinterpret it because some people are not going to be happy about it by using the wrong kind of theory, then it's a disservice, right, to the individuals who have taken the time to participate in the study. So using critical race theory was the most appropriate, I thought. And yeah, it's controversial, so what, right? If you're gonna talk about racism and you're afraid to use critical race theory, so then maybe I should find something else to do if I'm not going to use it. So that's why we chose it, because it is validating, it is about power dynamics, it encompasses all the intersectionality that comes with being a nurse, a woman in America, and the nursing profession. So that's why we used it. And if people didn't participate because of that, I don't think so, because nobody said to me, well, I'm sorry, if you're using critical race theory, I can't participate. Nobody did that. You know, people who didn't participate probably because they were so busy, you know, and couldn't find a time that worked, or, you know, they forgot about it even though they said yes. So, and that, you know, you have to be careful when you're trying to collect data that you don't pressure people too much, right? Because you want them to be willing to talk to you.
Absolutely. And you kind of stole my next question, but you kind of spoke to it already. But my next question was there any connection between the critical race theory and the attrition of participants?
Yeah, so I don't think there was. I don't think there was because, like I said, so a lot of about 56, 54 people responded to it, but we ended up with 34. And like I said, the people who did, you know, come back, actually somebody responded back, oh, are you done with this study? I forgot, I wanted to participate. That was 2 months after the data collection had ended. So I knew that it was people were just so busy, right? So nobody said no because of that. But some people, you know, I had to, you know, kind of give them a link to go look at my previous work, because I wanted them to understand that racism and race is going to be front and center in this experience, because that's what I want to talk about. How does being a Black woman affect your leadership? How do you lead as a Black woman? How do you make decisions as a Black woman in nursing? So I wanted them to understand this is about you as a Black woman and as a Black woman nurse leader, period, and how you operate within that body of who you are as a Black person in America and in nursing profession. So, and you know, people, and they looked at it and they came back and said, sure, I'll talk to you. So people who have been nurses, who have been leadership for a long time. And one of the great things is the honesty. You know, they really down to earth honesty about their experiences. And they weren't all negative, right? Because there were 2 papers that came from this, there's gonna be a 3rd paper, because there was this all encompassing, you know, experience from when they were students to when they were first nurses, then, you know, to academia and leadership and, you know, what's been happening all along and where they are now with that, you know, how they have evolved, you know, in that, and how they relate to students or the Black nurses or the, you know, faculty and all of those things. So those are critical when you're looking at somebody's experience, because you want to validate it. So it did not cause attrition, I don't think, anyway. If it did, they didn't tell me.
That's good to hear, Dr. Kechi. So you talked about honest responses of the participant. So Dr. Moore, I'll throw this one to you. Were the findings from the participant more revelatory for you or confirmatory? And of the themes, any one theme that personally resonated and why? I'll throw this to you, Dr. Moore, first, and then Dr. Kechi can chime in.
Sure. So I think they were confirmatory for me. Being a Black woman in academia, a lot of the themes that came up were themes that I can relate to and have personally experienced. The other piece I did want to touch on is, I think this study was an opportunity to amplify stories and voices, because I know personally as a Black woman in academia, nobody has ever asked me what my experience is and how we can make that better, right? So I think this study in and of itself allowed Black women in leadership positions within academia to have their voices amplified in a confidential space, right? That will hopefully lead to meaningful changes. So I did want to say that piece just to piggyback on what Dr. Kechi was speaking about prior to. But I do think from my perspective with the study and the themes that were uncovered, it was confirmatory. What occurred, because I personally experienced that, and in conversations with other faculty members who looked like me, similar stories have been shared confidentially in private. And then I'll pass it to Dr. Kechi.
Yeah, so I would say that it was both, you know, revelatory and confirmatory, because there were some people at the level they are in nursing that I didn't think that when I was talking to them, their experience was gonna make me cry after, you know, we hang up the phone. Because I mean, when you have to be strong and you listen to that, you know, for people who literally, I have the greatest respect for Black women leaders. I have the greatest respect for them. And when you talk to some of them, and at the end of a discussion, you have to step back, and it almost makes you sad that, okay, if they are at this level and experiencing this, what is the hope for me, right? Like almost like that. Like I'm like, oh my goodness. So, and then, but their attitude as well, like resilience, their attitude, their strength. But it also made me somewhat question, why do we have to keep being this strong, right? Why is the expectation that Black women have to, you know, be this extra strong and take on these roles and responsibilities when nobody else is asked to do that? And that's what I meant by yes and no, is that when does it end? At what level do you get to in nursing profession where this experience becomes much better, where you don't have to deal with it anymore to that level? You know, so that's what I meant by yes and no, confirmatory and revelatory in that sense. But for the most part, you know, one of the reasons I study race and racism is because I became aware of racism as an adult because I grew up in Nigeria. So my experience of racism was almost like a backlash. You know, what is going on here, right? Because it wasn't something that I knew growing up as a kid. So for me, it was like, are you kidding me? Like what? So that's why I study that, because I don't get it. Not that I don't get it, but are you crazy? Like for real, what do you mean, right? So for me, it annoyed me, it angered me. I get mad and I get cold. So that's part of the reasons that I studied this topic and why I wouldn't be deterred from it. That's why nobody could talk me out of it, because people did try to talk me out of it and nobody could, was because I thought that, are you kidding me? Because let me tell you the experience I had. The first time I went to the Association of Black Nurse Faculty, I was floating on air. It was like this experience that I have never experienced in my life, because I have been spent so much time in the company of white people, making me feel like I'm nobody and nothing, that when I went there and saw these women and men, Black nurses in America, with all these credentials and all this knowledge, I was on top of the world, right? So I brought back with me that experience, and that feeling lasted me for months. It validated who I was as an academic and as a faculty member. So the fact that I kept seeing that, and we ran around the cooler, people talk about these experiences in hushed tones or quietly and things like that. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, if they're talking to me, I'm not the only person feeling this thing. So why is it that when I look in the literature, nobody's talking about it? So that's why I decided that's what I'm gonna study. And so the experience people have, they just keep quiet and they talk about it quietly. And then we go around like it's okay, and it is not okay. So yes, both confirmatory and revelatory, but that it doesn't end when your leadership role goes higher, but it does need to end. Nobody should have to experience that. That's the point of it. And I'm hoping that amplifying the voice of nurse leaders, Black nurses, nursing students, that something is gonna be done so that we can be talking about this 20 years from now.
And then the other thing I just want to say is that we hear a lot that data drives change. So this is data, right? So this should be the driver of the changes that we need within our profession around racism and nursing.
So I posted the themes in the chat for everyone to see. And I would say the illusion of diversity and inclusion while trying to survive was the one that resonated. And with that said, my next question is, what's one thing that was not included in the publication that still needs to be highlighted? What's that one thing that still needs to be said?
Oh, wow, what needs to be said?
So much.
That the number of Black nurse faculty needs to go up, like yesterday. that the people who are currently doing it are inundated, that there isn't enough time and enough of us to support the growth and the need for Black nurses and Black students, for new Black faculty. And many of the nurse leaders, just by being in their roles, are role models, they are mentors. They are like a reality to a dream many of us have about where we want to find ourselves. And they are doing a lot of work supporting as much as can be expected of one person or very few people, right? So that's happening. Mentoring is a big deal. You know, despite the obstacle, you know, many of them find the time to mentor and continue to mentor people, you know, as they go along. And I also think that we need to look at white nurse leaders, right? It's not only about DEI statements. It's not only about this is our mission. We need to ask that question. How do you implement your missions? What are you doing as a white nurse leader to amplify? What are you doing to make a change based on all these reports, right? The ANA survey, all of these reports, what is it you are doing? And how important is that to them? You know, it's like saying, you know, put your money where your mouth is. Like, what are you doing? So I think that that's something that needs to be explored, is white nurse leaders. What are you doing about diversity, equity, inclusion, and anti-racism in your institutions, in your work setting? So because that's what part of what I was getting from the Black nurses when I was asking them. They know what they're doing. They don't know what their white faculty are doing. You know, that's kind of what I was, you know, hearing is, what are they doing? Because this is what I'm doing, and this is the barriers that I'm finding, and this is what they're doing to me, trying to do that. You know, so maybe you should ask them what they're doing about it. So, and hopefully somebody in this group is gonna work with me or other people and ask them, what are you doing about it? Like, put your money, how are you putting your money where your, you know, where your mouth is?
And just to build on what Dr. Kechi has said so eloquently, it's really strategically dismantling systematic racism that has lived and been embedded in our profession for many, many years, which takes a lot of work to do. But I think the biggest thing is recognizing it, which I think a lot of our nursing colleagues have done, but not only recognizing it, but figuring out ways to change it and undo those processes that have been put in place to cause Black and Brown communities of nursing to experience this within our profession. But it really takes true intentions to do that. And again, it's not just words, right? So it's having strategic goals to meet what your mission says, what your values say, right? We have national organizations who come out with national statements about racism in nursing, but what are they doing? And how are they tracking it and measuring and making sure that it's meaningful and sustainable, and that it truly dismantles those systems that cause racism within our profession? And holding them accountable. There should be accountability within our profession. So I think it took a while for it to become this way. So I think it'll take a while for it to change, but meaningful, sustainable changes over time can dismantle these systems.
Great, now it's my turn. So as someone who's been in academia for over 21 years, from adjunct to assistant dean now, I have to say your article really spoke to me. I really thought you were writing it for me. So, and the areas that really I could connect with was feeling isolated as one of the only few Black faculty. Also feeling like the token Black faculty to kind of make the appearance of an institution promoting DEI, but not truly having the same say as other faculty. and also feeling like you're responsible for solving all the DEI issues of your institution. So those areas really resonated with me. So my question is a little bit broader. What advice, and I want to get from both of you, and I'll start with Dr. Moore, what advice would you give a new Black faculty that's entering this very complex world of academia? What would be some key pieces of advice you would give him or her? Starting with Dr. Moore.
That's a great question, Dr. Bryant. So I think Dr. Kechi mentioned it earlier. So getting involved in Black faculty organizations early on. You build your family, you build your village that helps support you and give you those resources that you'll need when you're navigating this academia space. Not only being a part of those such organizations, but finding a mentor, making sure there's a mentorship plan in place. So when I came on as faculty, there was a mentor, but there wasn't a plan. They said, this person is your mentor. I met with this person one time and never did anything, nothing came from it. And then being very intentional about who's selected as your mentor. So I'm all for having a diverse body of mentors, right? It's fine to have white women, white men, Asians, Black people, Hispanics, it could vary. But I think having a mentor that you can truly identify with will really be beneficial to your career and development as a Black faculty member within any institution. So that will be the key things. Build your village with organizations that align with your core values and making sure you have a mentor that really helps and is invested in you. Not because the dean or associate dean assigned this person, right? But because this person is invested in growing you to the next level, regardless of what background they may come from in terms of race, ethnicity, or gender, right? But making sure they're truly invested in growing that generation of nursing leaders. And I didn't get that until later on in my career, but I think that's so invaluable to your growth and development as a Black faculty member within any institution.
I echo what Dr. Moore said. One of the things one of my participants said is, if you are on the tenure track, find out what counts and how much they count for. So don't spend all your time and energy on all the activities that does not contribute to your tenure, because that's very important for you. So I think that that's one thing. And I also agree about mentoring. Find mentors in academia don't have to be nurses. They can be from liberal arts. They can be from medicine. They can be from physical therapy. They can be from any other spaces. And I find that when you don't have to compete with them, that they are more honest with you, that they are gonna tell you the ins and outs of the organization and how to achieve your goal. Because I find that sometimes, for whatever reason, nurses or white nurses think that they're in competition with you when everybody's just heading towards the same goal, to get tenure or to be successful. So finding a mentor is important. The nursing organizations that are around are important. And when you meet people at conferences and you say you're going to call, do call. I'm telling you, it takes effort. But when you form that family of people who understand you, you don't have to explain in great detail what you are experiencing, because once you say it, they get it. That's important. And if you are choosing a program of study, choose something that makes you happy. Because if people talk you out of what you really want to do, then you're doing it reluctantly. You don't put much effort in it because that's not where your heart is, right? If your mentor doesn't understand what your work is, they should be able to send you to somebody who gets it, even if they want to support you, right? We don't have to know everything, but we should be able to help people find people to support them in what their agenda is. So I think that's one of the other things that is really, really important. And as a new educator, you don't know everything. Let's face it. Nobody, every new job, there is a learning curve. Even when you are the expert, even again, when you are in charge, there is a learning curve that you have to go through. So be patient with yourself, but also seek the opportunities to learn about those things. Find somebody to tell you what's going on. And it's not about gossiping. It's not about who is who, but it's Like, this is what happens in this organization. If you want to know this person, this secretary has been here for 30 years, go ask them, right? So you want to know about the organization. You want to know about what happens within the organization, where to find resources, who you need to talk to. You know those powerful people who nobody knows is really powerful, but they're really, really powerful, and they say who sees the dean and who doesn't. So you want to know who those people are, because then you can have that connection to get you to understand what happens in the organization. And encourage people. It takes time. I have mentors and I have mentees who are not in my college, who are not even in my school, but I have that connection with them, because you have to be able to talk to somebody. You know, that day when you want to really kill people and you leave and get in your car and you need to make a call to talk to somebody, to talk you down before you get home. So you need people like that, to talk to. So have those people that don't judge you, that listen to you no matter what. So that's part of mentoring. They might not help you write your research project. They might not even know what you're talking about your study. But when you say, oh my God, this day could not come end soon enough, they get where you're coming from. I think that's really important in academia, right? Be open to learning, be open to learning. Mentor students, do service, but service doesn't always count as much when we're talking about academia. So do it, but do it smartly, and find people to support you.
Those are wonderful words of wisdom. So I want to encourage anybody, if you have questions, this is the time. Please put it in the chat box, or you can unmute and ask your questions yourself. But I do have one that I did see that was in the chat. And the question is, do you think experiences of Black faculty is different, whether you're from a PWI or HBCU?
I think it's slightly different, but I'm gonna let Dr. Shawana Moore take that. I'm going to run upstairs to get my award and I'll be back. But if you finish before I come back, thank you so much, but I'm gonna try to get back soon.
Thank you, Dr. Kechi. Congratulations
Thanks,
again.
congratulations.
Thank you.
All right, so I think that is a very interesting question, and I want to answer that twofold. So I went to a HBCU. I'm an HBCU grad. That's why I completed my first undergrad degree. And my experience in an HBCU was completely different than when I attended a predominantly white organization or institution. So from a student perspective, I think it's very different. At HBCU, I felt like I had a whole lot of support. Faculty and staff were very encouraging. I was able to build my village with friend support system as well as the faculty and staff, right? Because I was in a majority because it was a HBCU, right? So I was surrounded by people who looked like me, I could identify with. When I went to a predominantly white institution, I would say I was probably culture shock. And I was just like, Lord, how am I going to make it through this institution? And I can remember I used to call my mom and I used to break down to her and cry because I felt so alone. So my nickname is Woni, and she brought me this plaque that said believe. And she had me and she had me put it inside of my dorm room on my desk. So each time I came in, I refocused and I looked and like believe. So it doesn't matter what's around me. I have to believe in my abilities that I can succeed in a profession. And I would say it was lonely, right? And I wouldn't say that the resources weren't at the predominantly white institution, right? Because they're filled with resources, right? But when you're not in the majority, it's kind of hard to navigate that space and like, who do you reach out to? And as I continue to grow within that organization, I was able to make connections with faculty and staff and meet my village of students and peers that I can relate to that helped me grow as a student, right? And I ended up staying on and becoming faculty at some point. And I'll say, my reason for becoming a faculty and staying faculty at that institution is because I knew what it was to be one of few Black students within that institution and not being able to identify more than one Black faculty member I can talk to. Now, I had white faculty members who invested in me, right? So I can't say I had a bad experience in that regards, but there's no better feeling than a feeling of a sense of belonging. I think sometimes we forget about that important piece when we do talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion work, because belonging is such a key component of it. So I think the experience is very different. and I experienced it from a student perspective, and as I transitioned to a faculty member, but I knew the importance of being a Black faculty member within predominantly white institutions to help foster the growth of new nurses that are coming into the profession, to be able to identify and say, this is a Black leader in nursing. You know, this is how far she's gotten. If she can do it, why can't I, right? I can see all that Dr. Moore is doing. I see the amazing work she's done. I see her as a national leader. If she's here, why can I do it? Why can I not do the same thing? So I think it's important for Black faculty members to not only be in HBCUs, but I think it's essential for us to be in PWI institutions as well. So I have a combined experience. I don't think it's a right or wrong answer or a right or wrong institution to be in. I think we need to be in both places.
Thank you for sharing that.
Sure.
We want to open it up. Do we have anyone in our audience that would like to ask a question of Dr. Moore? This is your time. And if you're too shy to unmute, you can also put your question in the chat box.
Definitely a lot of comments coming in about the loneliness and sense of belonging. I agree. People are resonating with your statements.
If no one has a question, I have another question. When you were writing this article, did you have a fear that there was going to be negative attention, retaliation, or did you face any after this was published?
Sure. So I think, so Dr. Kechi is amazing, as you all already know, and she has such a powerful sense of being. So being a part of a manuscript with a person that has that sense of leadership and a sense of self reassured me that it didn't matter how people viewed or took the article. We were doing important work that needed to be out there. And because even a question of fear of people being resistant or challenging the article really drove us to take a deeper dive into it, because that said, well, it's the reason why these feelings are coming up, because there's obviously a problem that hasn't been spoken about, right? And we need to be the core group of people that can help shed some light onto this issue and this problem. So I think in the back of our minds, we probably thought about it, but as Dr. Kechi mentioned earlier, she has her experience, I had my experiences, as well as our other co-author, Florence had her experiences. And it's like, with the combined three of us, it's important for us to amplify the voices of our community of Black and Brown nurses and what their experiences, and how we can amplify those voices to help really bring changes within our profession.
Great. And we do have a question. Dr. Celia McIntosh, would you like to unmute and ask your question?
Yes, thank you. Let me see if I framed this correctly. So I'm wondering, what advice or recommendation would you give to community organizations or like community nursing professional organizations that have Black faculty in them and you kind of want to support? I understand the concept of building the village, mentorship, but what other strategies or tips do you have to help them from the organization side to kind of infiltrate and address some of those issues within their organization?
I think you bring up a great question. I think one of the key first steps in my mind when exploring this work is doing an organizational assessment. So I'm not sure if funding is dedicated towards DEI work within an organization, but I think foundationally it's doing an assessment to see where you are as an organization when it comes to DEI. Maybe even bringing in a consultant to help with that work, because then that tells you where you are, right? And then you can develop, or organizationally, there can be a plan developed based on this assessment, right? So I think as nurses first, right, we always lead, we doing our assessment, right? We never just start coming up with interventions without having a baseline assessment. So I think first step will be recognizing that there's a need for it, right? Next thing is assessing organizationally where you sit when it comes to DEI. And there's a survey that is offered by a national organization, and I can send it to the DNPs of color, and maybe we can get it to our audience today. And they do a baseline assessment of organizations, and then they help them develop a strategic plan based on that organizational assessment. So I think that's a small but meaningful step in really being able to provide support and resources to Black faculty members within any organization.
All right, I
Thank
think we have a minute for one last question from our CEO. So Dr. McCamey was asking, where do we go from here? What's the charge that you give organizations like DNPs, NBNA, Diversity CRNA?
I think that's the phenomenal way to recharge our audience, right? And always bring back what we've learned from today to our organization. So first thing is action plan. First step is find out what's happening within your respective organizations when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion, right? If something is being done, figure out how you can be involved or how other people can become more involved in that. If nothing is being done, figure out how can something get started regarding diversity, equity, and inclusion, specifically when it comes to Black faculty members within the organization. So I think the biggest charge is determining what's happening within your organization. And if it is occurring, is it meaningful and is it sustainable and is it leading to change, right? I'm like, we always think about outcomes as faculty. What are the outcomes? What are the outcomes? We're driven by AACM, right? And when CCNE comes for accreditations, what are the outcomes? So with this work, we want to know what are the outcomes of initiatives that may be going on within your organization. And if there's not anything being done, what can be done to help start those initiatives so that change can be facilitated within an organization. The other thing I would say is that this work does not happen overnight. Like you probably hear that a lot when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion, which I'm always okay with, because I'm like, it didn't take overnight for it to become this way. But I think the most important thing about when that statement is made, even though it doesn't happen overnight, there should always be small wins that occur over time that meets outcomes that are meaningful and truly are sustainable. So I'm like, I'm okay with it being a journey and a marathon. I'm fine with that. But when we get to the 1 mile mark, I would like to see an outcome is met, right? And how is that sustained? So I think with any initiative that it should always be benchmarks, outcomes at various stages of that strategic plan or initiatives that are being met over time, because this is lifelong work. This work is never going to go away. It's not going to end with me, probably not my son or the grandchildren that'll come after. It'll be lifelong work, which I think we all on this call are dedicated to. And the other thing is, how do we make sure the generation behind us are continuously dedicated to this important work as well?
That is an amazing final response. I live to see a world where Black images, Black input will be just as valued as them, and with the proverbial they wanting the Black images. Because we operate in a space, I believe now, where it's the images, so they will have us, but then the input doesn't carry the same value. And I live for the day, and we're here to put in the work for the day when our input will be valued, elevated, and recognized, not just our images. So thank you so much, Dr. Moore.
Thank you all for having us. I think I can speak on behalf of Dr. Kechi as well as our full research team that we were completely honored to be a part of this discussion today, led by DNPs of color.
Amazing. And so this is the space, because there's no other space like this space. So our upcoming events, June 2nd at 7 p.m., tackling debt and strategies to manage money as high or potential high income earner. Please make sure that you go to our website, dnpsofcolor.org. June 18th, for those future docs, will be our virtual commencement. And then our conference, which was an amazing experience last year, will be October 22nd to 23rd. The theme for the conference is Changing the Game, Forging New Paths. Please make sure that you connect via our website to get all the information and be a part of this amazing organization. Thank you for coming out this evening. Enjoy what's left of our Nurses Week and be safe.
Are we staying on? Just checking.
Yeah, I
I
usually
think
like
so.
for us to
Okay.
debrief, just,
Yeah, I'm a simulation person. I'm used to debriefing.